Today is going to be a monumental day. We are now setting the tone for how we can preserve the lungs of the world. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, those of you who are here and those of you who are watching, my name is Sandrine Dixon de Clèves. I am the president of the Club of Rome, an organization that 50 years ago indicated that there were limits to growth and that we must live within our planetary boundaries. What we are doing today, in this decisive decade, is to demonstrate that forests are at the heart of the survival of people and of this planet. It is with great honor that I can host, with so many other distinguished guests, the Action on Forests and Land Use here at the World Leaders Summit. We will have two sessions. The first will be focused on specific commitments. Commitments that will move the bar from anything that you ever have seen before. These are made by governments and donors. And the second will be on the systemic shifts. We need to truly tackle both climate change and deforestation, and we will do that through specific, systemic, key actions that we will propose to you today. This is the most important agenda, and I hope that you will stay with me for the rest of the morning, because you will see not only distinguished guests, important leaders, but also game-changing commitments from philanthropy and from business. To tell us why this agenda is so incredibly important, here's a film narrated by Sir David Attenborough.
"10,000 years ago, Earth was home to an estimated 6 trillion trees. By the end of the last century, that number had halved. Our taming of the wild is often regarded as a routine part of humanity's progress. But, as we are fast discovering, by removing forests, we are harming biodiversity and ourselves.
I can't think of anything that we do which is not founded on nature's processes. So if we jeopardize that, it's not just our economies that are in trouble. Our lives are in trouble.
To have any chance of keeping below 1.5 degrees of global warming, we need to value the services that healthy forests can provide. Services such as absorbing vast amounts of carbon from the atmosphere, cleaning the air we breathe, and providing fresh water, inspiring immense spiritual and cultural value, as well as underpinning healthy food systems and generating new income opportunities.
Acai berry brings $1.5 billion to the Amazon economy a year. This is more than timber. So is it possible that there is no economic value out of this tremendous biodiversity?
Our challenge now must be to halt deforestation and begin restoring forests around the world. And we must do this within the decade, or risk the collapse of forests worldwide. It is a huge undertaking, and every country will need its own tailored approach. Some solutions are already underway.
We've realized that to have a healthy economy and a healthy society, we need healthy ecosystems. The payment for environmental services financially rewards landowners, including indigenous communities, for protecting and restoring forests.
Now we need to accelerate action on a global scale. We can ensure global commodities are traded sustainably, end investments that fund the destruction of forests, and instead support solutions that harness the resilience of nature. We can empower indigenous people who've lived in harmony with the natural world for millennia to be forest guardians.
The 400 million indigenous peoples around the world, we all know how we can to better manage our ecosystem. Those knowledges we developed for centuries. So these need to be recognized and valued.
All the countries, businesses and communities represented here today have the opportunity to change history by preventing further deforestation and restoring the natural world. In doing so, you could leave a legacy as the leaders who took this critical step before it was too late. That is the opportunity in front of you.
How can we not be inspired by the incredible Sir David Attenborough? May I now ask you to turn your attention to three very important leaders, including the host of this very conference. I would like to welcome to the stage President Ivan Duque of Colombia, President Joko Widodo of Indonesia, and of course, our honorable host, Prime Minister Boris Johnson of the United Kingdom, for our first session on country ambition. Gentlemen, here, I will be here, President of Indonesia. Prime Minister, I will allow you to go to the stage first. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandrine, and good morning, everybody, my fellow leaders. And thank you to Sir David Attenborough for that amazing call to action. David Attenborough, a giant redwood of environmental campaigners. Welcome to the first ever COP World Leaders Session on forests and land use, an event that I hope will become a fixture of COP, because climate change and biodiversity are two sides of the same coin. We can't deal with the devastating loss of habitats and species without tackling climate change, and we can't deal with climate change without protecting our natural environment and respecting the rights of indigenous people who are its stewards. So it's central to the ambition of the UK's COP presidency that we act now and we end the role of humanity as nature's conqueror and instead become nature's custodian. We have to stop the devastating loss of our forests, these great teeming ecosystems, trillion-pillared cathedrals of nature, 3 trillion-pillared cathedrals of nature that are the lungs of our planet. And the destruction, together with agriculture and other change of land use, that accounts for almost a quarter of all global emissions. So, if we want to keep the Paris goal of 1.5 degrees in sight and support communities in the front line of climate change, we must protect and restore the world's forests, and I believe we can do it. And many in this room have already made bold commitments, including President Widodo, who's introduced a moratorium on forest and peatland exploitation in Indonesia. President Duque, thank you. President Duque who has taken fantastic strides in safeguarding the Colombian Amazon, as well as leaders of the countries of the Congo Basin who are working to protect their precious forest. And with today's Glasgow Leaders Declaration, not 105, but I'm told that today 110. Is that right, Sandrine? 110 leaders have come together representing over 85% of the world's forest estate. They've made a landmark commitment to work together to halt and reverse deforestation and land degradation by 2030. Not just halt, but reverse. And that means more leaders than ever before have now signed up to protect our forests, from countries in the north and the south with temperate forests, tropical forests, and including nations like China, Russia, Brazil, some of the largest forest estates in the world. And what is most significant about this declaration is not just the range of countries coming together, but also that we're working in partnership with the private sector, with philanthropists, with indigenous people and local communities to address the economic drivers of deforestation. And there are interesting parallels here with our wider efforts on reducing emissions. For years we made pledges about reducing the use of coal, but what really matters is the rapid development of clean technologies with private sector investment. And this transformation has become an unparalleled economic opportunity for growth and for job creation. And so we're taking similar steps today to make forest conservation not just right for our planet, but right for our economies too. We know that 80% of tropical deforestation is driven by the global trade in agricultural commodities. So the UK and Indonesia have brought together countries that produce and consume these goods to agree a roadmap for sustainable trade so that we can grow our economies whilst reducing the pressure on our forests. And I'm delighted that this has now been signed by 28 countries, accounting for around 3/4 of global trade in these commodities. And as a result, cocoa farmers in West Africa should receive a better, fairer price for their products in return for protecting their forests. International trade standards should reward producers who shift their production to more sustainable methods, and assisted by new technology, supply chains can and will become ever more transparent. So as consumers, we will all be able to enjoy guilt-free chocolate. I mean, I suppose that's carbon guilt-free, not calorie guilt-free chocolate, safe in the knowledge that we have not just helped to prevent deforestation, but unlocking the opportunities of a sustainable food and land use system worth £4.5 trillion worth of trade by the end of this decade. We also want to mobilize global finance on an unprecedented scale. In the last decade, roughly 40 times more finance flowed into unsustainable land use practices than into forests protection and conservation, while agriculture, forests and other land use receives just 2% of available finance. So as we sign this declaration today, let's also galvanize a radical shift in public and private finance. Let's channel funds towards securing the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities and shift trillions towards supporting sustainable jobs, so that protecting our forests is not only the right course of action to tackle climate change, but the right course for a more prosperous future for us all. And like the advance of Birnam Wood at the end of Shakespeare's great Scottish tragedy, let's work together, not just to protect the forests, but also to ensure that the forests return. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Prime Minister, for setting the scene for this very ambitious set of commitments that we will have today. And now, can I please turn to President Duque, if you would like to use the lectern?
Good morning, Mr. Prime Minister, President. It's a great honor for me to participate in this very important panel. We're gathered here in Glasgow in the COP26 to discuss the future of the world. And we embrace this discussion also considering that this COP will have a big impact on the biodiversity COP15 that will take place in 2022. Both are intertwined, and the future of biodiversity also depends on what we do here. So we're conscious that the most important thing that we can do in order to avoid a climate disaster is that we accelerate our route to achieve carbon neutrality. But I want to raise today in this panel that it's very important to be carbon neutral, but it's also very important to be nature positive. Carbon neutral and nature positive are two concepts that must be in the minds and hearts of every citizen. I come from a country where 52% of our land is tropical forest. 35% of our land is Amazonic land. And we have 52% of the world high-altitude ecosystems, better known as páramos. So we come today not with a theoretical approach. We come here with clear commitments. And we decided to sign the Leaders' Pledge for Nature so that by 2030, we will have 30% of our land being declared a protected area. But I must say this today, we're not waiting until 2030. We are today committing ourselves to protect 30% of our territory as a protected area in 2022, because we must act now. We're working to achieve this, also with sound regulation. We approved an anti-deforestation bill that is increasing the punishments for environmental crimes in our country. We've also made the protection of biodiversity one of the most important objectives of our national security strategy. And we launched the Artemis campaign so that all the forces and society all work together to protect biodiversity and to prevent further deforestation. But the most important thing we have also done is that we joined the 1 Trillion Trees Initiative that was launched 2 years ago in Davos. And we committed to plant 180 million trees by August 2022. And ladies and gentlemen, we are going to fulfill that commitment, and we will finish this year with 120 million trees already planted in Colombia. And we also know that the most important challenge we have before us is how do we connect financing with the conservation of these ecosystems. So that's why it's not just to declare 30% of our territory being a protected area, but how we conserve those territories and how do we connect green financing with the protection of these environments. I think this is the most important thing that we have to reflect and be innovative and be collaborative. So my invitation to all of you is that in order to protect the tropical forest and the forest around the world, we need to start paying for environmental services. And we need also to expand our tuition and our pedagogy with the public so that we embrace this ethics of the 21st century, but that every conservated land in the world can also be linked to green financing and being able to compensate this in the carbon market. So, Mr. Prime Minister and President, I'm delighted to be here in this panel, and I want to thank you, Prime Minister Johnson, because the UK has been very supportive of all the efforts in Colombia. Yesterday, we received $33 million that are payment by results in conserving the Amazon. And I want to also praise the work of Minister Goldsmith, because with the United Kingdom, we have been able to work along so that we create a new environment in our country so that the protection of the trees and biodiversity becomes the duty of every citizen. So thank you so much, and I hope that today, with this commitment that we have made clear, Colombia also demonstrates to the world that if a country that has only 0.6% of the world greenhouse gases emissions is making the commitment of protecting 30% of our land in 2022, why don't other countries do the same? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. President Duque, for your incredible remarks.
Thank you, sir.
Very much appreciated. May I please show gratitude for what you have done on the Leaders' Pledge, your pledge on the 120 billion trees, and also bringing in the importance of capital and trade. And that is why I would like to now turn to President Joko Widodo of Indonesia. Indonesia has been a wonderful leader on the forest agenda over recent years, and you are also the co-chair, dear President, of the Forest, Agriculture, Commodities and Trade Dialogue. So please, I hope you will also indicate to us how this is going forward. Welcome.
Yang Mulia Boris Johnson, Yang Mulia Ivan Marquez, Bapak Ibu yang saya hormati. Pada KTT kemarin, saya menyampaikan bahwa sektor kehutanan dan lahan di Indonesia akan mencapai net carbon sink pada tahun 2030. Ini adalah komitmen Indonesia untuk menjadi bagian dari solusi. Dan capaian nyata Indonesia di sektor kehutanan tidak terbantahkan. Pada tahun 2020, tingkat kebakaran hutan di Indonesia diminimalisir hingga 82%. Pada tahun 2019, penurunan emisi dari hutan dan tata guna lahan juga ditekan hingga 40,9% jika dibandingkan tahun 2015. Deforestasi hutan di Indonesia juga mencapai tingkat terendah dalam 20 tahun terakhir. Ini dilakukan saat dunia tahun lalu kehilangan 12% lebih banyak hutan primer dibanding tahun sebelumnya. Dan ketika banyak negara justru mengalami kebakaran hutan dan lahan terbesar sepanjang sejarah. Keberhasilan ini dicapai karena Indonesia menempatkan aksi iklim dalam konteks pembangunan yang berkelanjutan. Dan kebijakan pengelolaan hutan berkelanjutan harus memadukan pertimbangan lingkungan dengan ekonomi dan sosial. Kemitraan dengan masyarakat juga diutamakan. Program perhutanan sosial dibuat agar konservasi hutan disertai terciptanya penghidupan bagi masyarakat sekitar. Hal ini penting karena 34% dari seluruh desa di Indonesia berada di perbatasan atau di dalam hutan kawasan. Jutaan masyarakat Indonesia menggantungkan hidupnya dari sektor kehutanan. Menafikan hal ini bukan saja tidak realistis, namun juga tidak akan sustainable. Bapak Ibu sekalian, perkenankan saya berbagi perspektif menjadikan hutan bagian dari aksi iklim global. Pertama, perhatian kita harus mencakup seluruh jenis ekosistem hutan, tidak hanya hutan tropis, tapi juga hutan iklim sedang dan boreal. Kebakaran hutan misalnya berdampak pada emisi gas rumah kaca dan keanekaragaman hayati apapun jenis ekosistemnya. Terkait pengelolaan hutan, Indonesia juga telah mengubah paradigma dari manajemen produk hutan menjadi manajemen landscape hutan, sehingga pengelolaan area hutan menjadi lebih menyeluruh. Selain itu, Indonesia juga melakukan restorasi ekosistem mangrove, hutan mangrove yang berperan dalam menyerap dan menyimpan karbon. Indonesia memiliki lebih dari 20% total area mangrove dunia, 3,3 juta hektar hutan mangrove di Indonesia, terbesar di dunia. Kedua, mekanisme insentif harus diberikan bagi pengelolaan hutan secara berkelanjutan. Sertifikasi dan standar produksi harus disertai market incentives, sehingga berfungsi mendorong pengelolaan hutan yang berkelanjutan bukan menjadi hambatan perdagangan. Sertifikasi, metodologi, dan standar harus didasarkan pada parameter yang diakui secara multilateral, tidak dipaksakan secara unilateral dan berubah-ubah. Sertifikasi harus berkeadilan sehingga berdampak pada kesejahteraan utamanya para petani kecil. Sertifikasi juga harus mempertimbangkan semua aspek SDGs sehingga pengelolaan hutan sejalan dengan pengentasan kemiskinan dan pemberdayaan masyarakat. Ketiga, mobilisasi dukungan pendanaan dan teknologi bagi negara berkembang. Komitmen harus dilakukan melalui aksi nyata, implementasi nyata, bukan retorika. Memberikan bantuan bukan berarti dapat mendikte, apalagi melanggar hak kedaulatan suatu negara atas wilayahnya. Dukungan harus country driven, didasarkan pada kebutuhan real negara berkembang pemilik hutan. Bagi Indonesia, dengan atau tanpa dukungan, kami akan terus melangkah maju. Kami kembangkan sumber-sumber pendanaan inovatif, di antaranya pendirian Badan Pengelola Dana Lingkungan Hidup, penerbitan Green Bond, dan suku hijau atau Green Suku, serta mengembangkan mekanisme nilai ekonomi karbon sebagai insentif bagi pihak swasta dalam mencapai penurunan emisi. Para pemimpin, 90% penduduk dunia yang hidup dalam kemiskinan ekstrim bergantung pada hutan. Penyalahgunaan isu climate change sebagai hambatan perdagangan adalah kesalahan besar. Hal ini akan menggerus trust terhadap kerjasama internasional mengatasi climate change dan malah menghalangi pembangunan berkelanjutan yang justru sangat dibutuhkan. Pengelolaan hutan dalam kerangka pembangunan berkelanjutan menjadi satu-satunya pilihan. Kami siap berbagi pengalaman dan pengetahuan untuk itu. Mari kita kelola hutan yang pro-environment, pro-development, dan people-centered. Ini adalah tujuan utama dari Forest, Agriculture, and Commodity Trade Dialogue yang diketuai bersama Indonesia dan Inggris. Sehingga hutan akan menjadi solusi berkelanjutan bagi aksi iklim global. Terima kasih.
Thank you very much, President Jokowi, and in particular also for now launching another key commitment, which is the Forest, Agriculture, and Commodity Trade Dialogue Roadmap. 28 countries that have endorsed this roadmap, phenomenal. A new partnership which is revolutionary and covers 75% of the global market. But you also made another reflection which was fundamental, and that was the role of communities and indigenous peoples. Because what we will be seeing today is the variety of commitments that are systemic on trade, on capital flows, and for the first time ever on the deep protection and allocation of help to indigenous peoples that are the stewards of the forests. So that completes this opening session. I would like to very much thank you, and also thank you, President Duque, and of course, yourself, Prime Minister Johnson, as a host. And we can now leave the session and open up for the rest of today's incredible announcements. Thank you very much. Well done, all of you. Well done. Thank you.
Hello, good morning. I'm so glad to see all of you here in person. And thank you very much, Excellency, Prime Minister. Thank you to all the presidents who passed here, who caring about forest and about land. Excellencies, distinguished guests, I am happy to be here today as an indigenous woman that consider forest and land as home, not as commodities. And I am very glad that this climate negotiation have started to consider that nature and forests have a key role to play in the meeting the objective of the Paris Agreement. It took you 25 COPs to understand that indigenous peoples have known forever our planet is alive. Soil are her skin. Forests are her hair. Rivers are her blood. And today, the earth is sick, probably dying. Today, at this special event, indigenous peoples bring something special to the table, our solution. Some government and company, including in this room, are responsible for the deforestation and land stealing in many areas. And while some are expert on deforestation, we, indigenous peoples, have a PhD in reforestation and sustainable management of land. Even we represent only 5% of the world's population. We protect 80% of the remaining biodiversity. We repair the forests, even when climate causes dramatic forest fire. In the Sahel, my people are the best architects of the Great Green Wall that avoid desertification and restore land degradation. We do this as a duty, not as a job, because we must protect the forest and land that give us all what we want: food, medicine, knowledge, and so on. We use our indigenous people's traditional knowledge as a tool to protect nature. We don't stand in front of you as a victim. No. Today, we stand as climate champion. Indigenous peoples are already have a neutral way of living in this planet. So, I come to this leaders' event on forest and land with a very simple message. We have the map. We know where we are going, and we know how to drive. So, give us the key. First, we celebrate the announcement of the dedicated initial $1.7 billion to implement indigenous-led solution. Yes, help is coming, and we celebrate the beginning of this process of ground action. Congratulations. Paris committed, and Glasgow is delivering. Second, support us also by ensuring the full respect of our rights to land, territories, and resources. This is true for government, but also for companies. There is no value in making beautiful speech here about deforestation if at home you let the private sector steal indigenous people's land or destroy the ecosystem. Finally, it is great to see world leaders, as just we hear here, committed to protect forests and land. But you will not be able to do this in the offices. We, as the guardian of the forest, are the best, we are also the best bankers to manage this amazing investment. And to do so, we need to work together as a partners, not as beneficiaries. And we all know partners work together, and sit together to take the decision. Excellencies, in 10 days, I will go back home, and nothing will change yet. So the next months will be critical to implement the commitment that have been made today. And in 1 year, we will meet again on my country or in another countries in Africa, because I belong to all those lands. On 1 year, in the next COP, but you all know 1 year is not enough for a tree to grow, but it is enough time for trust to die. And trust is not like forest. When gone, it's never come back. So let us celebrate and let's implement all together. Thank you.
So now we are moving into a very exciting session, and I'd like to first thank Hindu, who has been so fundamental in terms of ensuring that Indigenous rights are front and center when we think about the protection of our ecosystems. So thank you, Hindu, for the remarkable testimony and for giving a voice to the vision of so many Indigenous people and the stewards of the land. We're going to move into the next session, which is talking about scaling up action and finance. How do we shift capital to ensure that actually we protect our forests, but as what's been said so many times, we generate our land and we think about restoration? It is my great honor to welcome to the stage Prime Minister Boris Johnson of the United Kingdom, President of the Democratic Republic of Congo, Félix Tshisekedi, the President of the United States of America, Joe Biden, the President of Gabon, Ali Bongo Ondimba. I'm going to ask you to move one over. Yep. Thank you. You're there. Thank you, sir. And I seem to be missing the President of Gabon. He's coming. Okay. What an incredible lineup, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, to be part of this incredible declaration here in Glasgow on forests. So it is first my pleasure to invite the President of the United States, Joe Biden, to take the lectern. Welcome, sir. You can come here, or you can go there. Please.
Good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be with you. My fellow leaders, I'm honored to represent the United States in this important discussion. Conserving our forest and other critical ecosystems is an indispensable piece of keeping our climate goals within reach, as well as many other key priorities that we have together. Ensuring clean water, maintaining biodiversity, supporting rural and indigenous communities, and reducing the risk of the spread of disease. Our forests are also nature's carbon capture, cycling CO2 out of our atmosphere. And I want to recognize the presidents of the Republic of the Congo and Gabon are here today for their considerable commitment to conserve their forests. If we all work together to make sure these precious resources are conserved in Africa and around the world, forests have the potential to reduce carbon globally by more than one-third. So we need to approach this issue with the same seriousness of purpose as decarbonizing our economies. That's what we're doing in the United States. We've already exceeded the 2020 bond challenge goal of more than 20 million hectares of forest land under restoration thus far. During my first week in office, I issued an executive order, set the goal of conserving at least 30% of all U.S. lands and waters by the year 2030. We have put in place protections for the Songus Forest in Alaska, the world's largest intact temperate rainforest. And today I'm announcing a new plan to conserve global forest, which will bring together a full range of U.S. government tools, diplomatic, financial, and policy, to halt forest loss, restore critical carbon sinks, and improve land management. Through this plan, the United States will help the world deliver on our shared goal of halting natural forest loss and restoring at least an additional 200 million hectares of forest and other ecosystems by the year 2030. This plan is the first of its kind, and taking a whole-of-government approach and working in our case with Congress to deploy up to $9 billion in U.S. funding through 2030 to conserve and restore our forests and mobilize billions more from our partners. As part of this, we're going to work to ensure markets recognize the true economic value of natural carbon sinks and motivate governments, landowners, and stakeholders to prioritize conservation. We'll work to align the private sector investment flows in our climate and conservation goals, including reducing the drivers of deforestation, creating sustainable supply chains, pursuing more sustainable commodity sourcing, and at every step we'll work in partnership with the people most impacted by deforestation and most experienced in sustainable land management, local communities, indigenous people, local governments, civil societies, to make sure our approaches are effective and focused on the needs of vulnerable populations. Preserving forests and other ecosystems can and should play an important role in meeting our ambitious climate goals as part of the net zero emissions strategy we all have. And the United States is going to lead by our example at home and support other forested nations and developing countries in setting and achieving ambitious action to conserve and restore these carbon sinks. I'm confident we can do this. All we need to do is summon the will to do what we know is right and we know is necessary and know is in our capacity. So, as simple as it sounds, I think it is this simple. Let's get to work. We can do this, and it'll have a generational impact. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your inspirational words. We can get to work, we can do this, we can talk about carbon sinks and decarbonizing our economies at the same time. Absolutely. Further words of wisdom from now, notre cher président de la République démocratique du Congo. Merci d'être là avec nous, président Tshisekedi, pour nous dire un peu quelle est l'importance en fait du bassin du Congo, parce que vous venez du cœur du bassin du Congo, et l'importance des forêts au niveau du Congo. Je vous invite à venir nous parler.
Monsieur le Premier ministre du Royaume-Uni, Messieurs les chefs d'État, Mesdames et Messieurs, distingués invités, c'est un grand honneur pour moi de prendre la parole du haut de cette tribune consacrée aux forêts et à l'utilisation des terres. Permettez-moi de féliciter de manière particulière M. Boris Johnson, Premier ministre du Royaume-Uni, pour cette initiative. Je voudrais saluer particulièrement l'intérêt porté sur le bassin du Congo par ce sommet des leaders mondiaux. En effet, les forêts du bassin du Congo constituent le deuxième poumon du monde et contribue largement à la régulation de l'équilibre climatique mondial. Ce massif forestier est toutefois exposé au risque de déforestation. Dans le cadre de la mise en œuvre effective de l'accord de Paris, il est impératif de tenir compte d'atténuer ces risques car autrement il en résulterait une crise écologique majeure. Dans le cadre de la Commission des forêts de l'Afrique centrale, la COMIFAC, les pays membres du bassin du Congo partagent la vision d'un avenir durable. À cet effet, ils focalisent leurs efforts sur l'amélioration des conditions de vie de leur population. Dans le but d'assurer que ces populations ne contribuent pas à dégrader les ressources forestières, les solutions alternatives leur proposées sont l'agriculture écologique, la production de l'énergie propre et durable, ainsi que la préservation des droits des communautés locales et des peuples autochtones. Au vu de sa prépondérance dans le bassin du Congo, la République démocratique du Congo, comme pays solution, porte une grande ambition climatique et tient à en assumer le leadership. Mesdames et messieurs, en ma qualité de président en exercice de l'Union africaine, j'ai récemment lancé le plan de relance verte pour l'Afrique qui vise à renforcer les mesures en faveur de la viabilité de l'environnement et de la prospérité en Afrique. Fidèle à cette ambition, la République démocratique du Congo a pris les résolutions suivantes. Accroître notre contribution déterminée au niveau national en l'apportant à 21% de réduction d'émissions de gaz à effet de serre à l'horizon 2030. Lancer un programme visant à planter 1 milliard d'arbres à l'horizon 2023, élargir notre mix énergétique en combinant l'hydroélectricité, le solaire, la biomasse, etc. Le plan national stratégique de développement ainsi que les politiques publiques sectorielles qui en découlent se fondent sur cette vision. Par ailleurs, la protection des droits des communautés locales et des peuples autochtones est capitale. Nous nous engageons à en tenir compte dans notre stratégie d'industrialisation, d'investissements agricoles et dans la gouvernance forestière. La réorientation envisagée des productions agro-industrielles vers des zones savanicoles, c'est-à-dire hors des zones forestières et des tourbières, cristallise la volonté claire de mon pays à conserver les forêts des communautés locales et à garantir les droits des peuples autochtones. J'encourage les investissements structurants ainsi que les partenariats constructifs en direction des pays du bassin du Congo, dont la République démocratique du Congo représente les 60%. Mesdames et messieurs, pour clore mon propos, je voudrais souligner qu'outre l'urgente question de mobilisation des ressources adéquates, il faut joindre à cela plus de synergie d'action et de mutualisation de nos efforts à tous les niveaux. C'est dans cette perspective que la République démocratique du Congo approuve la déclaration de ce sommet et se trouve disposée à travailler en partenariat avec d'autres pays en vue d'atteindre les objectifs que nous nous sommes assignés. Je vous remercie.
Merci. Merci, Monsieur le Président. Je vous remercie pour votre déclaration, non seulement au niveau de l'importance synergique avec l'énergie propre, l'industrialisation et la nécessité aussi de prendre en compte les peuples autochtones. J'aimerais demander maintenant au président du Gabon, et monsieur, vous pourriez aller aux lectures ici à gauche. Monsieur le Président Ali Bongo, je sais que vous allez nous expliquer aussi l'importance de tout ce que vous faites au niveau des déclarations du Congo pour maintenir intactes les forêts. Encore un grand merci pour votre présence et tous vos objectifs pour protéger en fait vos forêts si chères.
Merci. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, my country, Gabon, is a high forest, low deforestation country. Forests cover 88% of Gabon, with 21% in protected areas. A further 60% are protected and managed in sustainable forestry concessions. The National Biodiverse Rainforest harbor 2/3 of the rate for the forest elephants, an indication both of their biological significance and, of course, their sustained efforts to reinforce natural resource governance. Since Copenhagen, where I made a strong commitment to fight climate change, our economy has absorbed just over 1 billion tons of CO2 net. Managing forests, protecting our parks, monitoring our land for illegal logging and mining activity, and fighting organized crime and terrorist groups who plunder our natural resources is not easy. It requires constant vigilance, technical know-how, logistical capacity, sustainable funding, and, most importantly, courageous, dedicated, and courageable forest managers. In the absence of just one of these requirements, forests are progressively degraded and wildlife slaughtered. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the Congo Basin is the heart and lungs of the African continent. We cannot win the battle against climate change unless we keep the Congo Basin forests standing. Furthermore, our forests send rain to the Sahel and to the Ethiopian highlands, feeding the Blue Nile and supporting agriculture in Egypt. They are critical to the stability both of the African continent and the world at large. Yet, the international community has consistently undervalued this critical ecosystem. Moreover, the developed world has plundered our forests, extracting logs that have been the foundation for thriving industry outside the African continent. When a log leaves the African continent, we receive less than 10% of the potential value and create just 10% of the jobs at source. For every job in Africa, there are 9 offshore. I see a sustainable forestry and timber processing industry as our best chance to transition from oil economy. We plan to save the forest by exploiting it sustainably, by ensuring it contributes to the Gabonese economy and provide jobs for hundreds of thousands of Gabonese people. If we want our forests to survive, they must be valuable to our nation. I invite the world to come and invest responsibly in Gabon's timber economy. I urge the world to stand by our side in our efforts to protect and understand our forest ecosystems. I hope that together we can navigate the complex economy and political process underway here in Glasgow to fix an equitable carbon price for the net positive nations to encourage others to join our exclusive club. His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales, speaking in Copenhagen in 2009, was kind enough to quote me as saying that the doors to the future are closing. IPCC tells us there is no valuable future without the tropical rainforest. It is my hope that Glasgow will mark a turning point and that together we will keep the forest standing and the door open for our children and their children. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, President Bongo. We have heard your message loud and clear, both in terms of the role of countries who have continued to preserve their forests, also the economic role of the forest and of those communities that live within the forest and those that can benefit from the forest. This very important point is something that we will continue to build on in terms of the commitments that we have made to Indigenous people and to the importance of both decarbonizing our economies and also ensuring that we create the carbon sinks that we need. So now I would like to invite Prime Minister Johnson to join at the lectern once again for a few reflections on these striking commitments that you have heard and the importance.
Thank you. Thank you again, Sandrine. And let me begin by thanking Joe, President Biden, for your fantastic commitment today, and also welcome the brilliant work that Presidents Bongo and Tshisekedi are doing to protect the Congo Basin. And I'm delighted to announce at this summit that the world is coming together around their effort, your effort, with at least $1.5 billion over the next 5 years to help protect the forests, peatlands and precious ecosystems of Central Africa. And this is part of a new global forest finance pledge of over, wait for it, of over $12 billion, amounting to the biggest collective commitment of public funds for forest and climate action in history. And I thank my friends and colleagues for their leadership, but I say to everybody else here at this COP, let's end this great global chainsaw massacre by making conservation do what we know it can do, and that is deliver long-term sustainable jobs and growth as well. And today is not just a vital win in the struggle to contain global temperature increases, though obviously it's also a huge economic opportunity. And this is the long-term sustainable path to ending the loss of our forests, protecting our sacred biodiversity, and helping to keep alive the ambition of 1.5 degrees by the end of the century. The old poem goes, "Woodman, woodman, spare that tree. Touch not a single bough. In my youth it sheltered me, and I'll protect it now." And we should protect our forests not just out of gratitude for what they've done to protect us and in our youth, but for what they're going to do and to continue to do for our children and our grandchildren. And with their great green umbrageous canopy of leaves, they will not only help us to turn the tide in the fight against climate change, they will shelter the entire human race. Thank you all very much for what you're doing.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister, and once again for very much demonstrating the excitement that we should be feeling today, both in terms of the Glasgow Declaration in protecting forests, but also the capital shifts that we are guaranteeing for the Congo Basin and also for other forests across the globe. I would like to now invite the Presidents of the United States, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Gabon to leave the stage towards the left. Thank you again, gentlemen, for your incredible leadership in the protection of forests.
Good job.
Thank you. You stay here with me.
I'm staying with you.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, we're going to sit down again.
Okay.
We are now transitioning to the very important role of philanthropy, of the private sector, and of investments that need to be coupled with public sector declarations. It is abundantly clear that we must do this together, private, public sector, making the commitments, but also, as we've indicated, shifting the capital. It is therefore with great pleasure that I invite Mr. Jeff Bezos, Executive Chair of Amazon and Executive Chair of the Bezos Earth Fund, to join us on stage. Let us be clear. It is the philanthropic organizations that are now enabling us to bring some of the finance that we need to bear in this very important area. Thank you so much, Mr. Bezos, for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you, Prime Minister, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Let me commend you, Prime Minister Johnson, for placing nature firmly on the agenda at COP26. Nature provides all the food we eat, the water we drink, and the oxygen we breathe. It gives us life. It is beautiful, but it is also fragile. I was reminded of this in July when I went into space with Blue Origin. I was told that seeing the Earth from space changes the lens through which you view the world. But I was not prepared for just how much that would be true. Looking back at Earth from up there, the atmosphere seems so thin, the world so finite and so fragile. Now, in this critical year, and what we all know is the decisive decade, we must all stand together to protect our world. Climate change gives us a powerful reason to invest in nature. Each year, forests and landscapes absorb 11 billion tons of CO2 from the atmosphere, helping to slow climate change. As we destroy nature, we reverse this process. Cut down a forest, destroy the mangroves, pave over the prairies, and instead of sequestering carbon, we emit it. In too many parts of the world, nature is already flipping from a carbon sink to a carbon source. This is a profound and urgent danger to us all. That's why last month in New York, 9 philanthropic organizations announced an additional $5 billion to support the goal of 30 by 30, to protect 30% of all land and sea by 2030. I was honored to be a part of this with a $1 billion pledge from the Bezos Earth Fund. And today, I'm pleased to announce a $2 billion pledge allocated directly to restoring nature and transforming food systems. This is part of the Bezos Earth Fund's $10 billion commitment to fight climate change, enhance nature, and advance environmental justice and economic opportunity. Together, this $3 billion in pledges will drive a new threefold nature agenda for the Bezos Earth Fund, focused simultaneously on conservation, restoration, and food transformation. We must conserve what we still have. We must restore what we've lost. And we must grow what we need to live without degrading the planet for future generations to come. In the atmosphere, molecules of carbon dioxide cause climate change and risk destroying life as we know it. But bring that carbon back down to Earth through the magic of photosynthesis into trees, plants, crops, and soil, and this brings life and vitality. Today, 2/3 of the land in Africa is degraded, but this can be reversed. Restoration can improve soil fertility, raise yields, and improve food security, make water more reliable, create jobs, and boost economic growth, while also sequestering carbon. Continent-wide initiatives like Africa 100 and the Great Green Wall offer significant hope. They must now be scaled up. Ahead of COP27 next year, the Bezos Earth Fund would be eager to participate in a concerted strategy led by African nations to seriously and effectively ramp up support for restoration on the continent. However, we cannot rely only on governments, NGOs, and philanthropies to solve the climate crisis. The private sector must also play its part to reduce carbon emissions. Companies need to take leadership positions. Amazon has co-founded the Climate Pledge with Christiane Figueres and set a goal to reach net zero carbon by 2040, 10 years ahead of the Paris Agreement goals. As part of this pledge, Amazon aims to power all its operations with 100% renewable energy by 2025 and is working to convert its delivery fleet to electric vehicles. Amazon is inviting other companies to join the Climate Pledge, and more than 200 have to date. Companies can also lead the way on nature-based solutions. Over the past 6 months, Amazon partnered with leading countries committed to protecting the tropical forests and their tropical forests, and the governments of Norway, the UK, and the US to mobilize an unprecedented level of funding to fight tropical deforestation through an initiative called the Leaf Coalition. Amazon has committed significant financial support for Leaf, and the coalition will be signing letters of intent with governments that are ready to receive support. More details will be shared in the next session. Let me be clear. When people hanker for the good old days and glamorize the past, they are almost always wrong. By almost all metrics, life is much better today than it was in the past. Global poverty rates are lower, infant mortality and life expectancies are better, and education rates are higher. But there is a notable exception. The natural world is not better today than it was 500 years ago, when we enjoyed unspoiled forests, clean rivers, and the pristine air of the pre-industrial world. This is an unacceptable anomaly, and it's one we can reverse. The question is simple. Will we in this room work together, do the hard work together, to gift our children and grandchildren an improving natural world? I know the answer is yes, and I look forward to working with all of you on this important and rewarding journey. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bezos, for raising the bar on philanthropic money, funding capital shifts that go towards climate change, forests, and nature. You're playing an absolutely incredible role, and we thank you for that.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We may all go out this way.
Your Excellencies and distinguished leaders, I come from Kenya, and that's the place I call it home. I won my first World Championships in 2003, and this summer I successfully defended my Olympic medal in marathon. I am lucky to say I have a long career. Today, I want to share the secret of my success with you, because I believe you can apply it too, and it will lead you to be successful in fighting climate change. Until a few years ago, I trained by listening to what my body was telling me. I was successful and won almost every marathon I raced in. But when I realized that I wanted to leave a legacy on the sport and run the world record, I knew I needed to do more. To achieve my legacy, I needed to advance my approach. I collected the brightest minds around me to help add data and new technologies in my training, so I could become more efficient and run times that no human has run before me. I started using data such as heart rate, sleep monitor, and even glucose monitor. We developed a shoe that was so full of innovation and new technologies that it protects us so well from the earth impact from the ground that I can now go for a run the day after a marathon. But feeling has always remained the key driver. I use data to confirm my feeling and make small adjustments to improve. How has adding data and innovation in technology helped me? In October 12, 2019, I became the first human ever to run the marathon under 2 hours. Something that was not thought possible until at least the year 2025. We are here today to speak about climate change. And also in Kenya, it's obvious that the world is going into the wrong direction. In Kenya, we live close to the equator, so there are no seasons. We only have periods in the year that we call the long rains, the short rains. But the rains haven't been the same for a while now. They often hardly bring any water, or sometimes they flood our farm fields, ruining all the crops. When I look to our world, I see the same metaphor as I see my career. There are Western countries who are so advanced with data and innovation, but whom are further removed from that initial feeling for the climate. Whereby in Africa, we feel so closely. What is changing? But don't adequately use data and innovation to make an impact. Today, I urge all of us to bring our worlds together, whereby we can combine our unique skills of staying connected to our feeling, added by the strengths of data and technical innovations. I know the success this combination can bring, and I know we will have a bright future if we can succeed in working together. The planet is in our dear hands. We have the will, we have the knowledge, we have the expertise, and we have the resources to change it. As the saying goes this way, in Canada, in a nursery school in Canada, it's written, the first time to plant a tree was 25 years ago. But the best and the great time to talk and act on climate change is today. Let us act. I thank you all.
Thank you so much. No, I'm good. Thank you. What an incredible treat to have a double Olympic gold medal winner give us his vision of the importance of forests. Can we have a loud round of applause? The way in which we protect our forests is a symbol of the protection of so many people. Those lungs were necessary to give us an Olympic winner. And now I would like to pass on to the next session. If we can match Kipchoge's marathon race in the way in which we dedicate ourselves to force, and I think this session will be another very inspiring call to action. Our next agenda item is going to highlight the potential to scale up carbon finance, to support efforts for the protection of forests, but also, very importantly, to halt and reverse forest loss. Can I please call to the stage Alan Jope, CEO of the incredible company Unilever, Jennifer Tauli Corpus from Niatero, His Excellency Sir Bahadur Dubba, Prime Minister of Nepal, and a very special moderator for this session, Tarja Badegashin. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm really excited to host today's session. In this session, we will learn about the LEAF Coalition. LEAF stands for Lowering Emissions by Accelerating Forest Finance. Launched at the Earth Day Climate Summit in April this year, the LEAF Coalition is a major new public-private market-based effort to protect tropical forests. To meet the Paris temperature goal, we must halt deforestation and restore millions of hectares of forest by 2030. To achieve this, we must substantially increase the flow of finance and crucially mobilize private capital. Strong voluntary carbon markets can be a key enabler for private investment in this area. Demand in these markets is growing in line with corporate net zero targets alongside a drive to eliminate deforestation from corporate supply chains and to become nature positive, all of which is critically needed to keep 1.5 alive. But with the proliferation of growth of carbon markets come concern about their integrity. Voluntary carbon markets must truly accelerate the climate action needed to achieve 1.5. And these markets must meet the expectations of both the buyers and the sellers. To address these concerns, we at the VCMI are working with key stakeholders across voluntary carbon markets, including countries. Like LEAF, VCMI is focused on best practice for the future of voluntary carbon markets. Our work ensures that as these markets transform, they contribute to the achievement of the Paris temperature goal and are additional to science-based action to decarbonize. We are here today to talk about the LEAF Coalition in this context. To open our conversation, I am joined by Alan Jope, CEO of Unilever, one of the key global businesses who have committed to backing this groundbreaking initiative. Alan, can you tell us why Unilever got involved in the LEAF Coalition and why high-integrity carbon markets matter to your business?
Sure. Thank you, Terry, and good morning. And I am here on behalf of Unilever, but also on behalf of all the LEAF partners. I think we all come here to Glasgow with high ambition, in the belief that 1.5 degrees has to become one of the organizing principles of the world's economy. And I think there's a cardinal truth. We can only deliver 1.5 degrees if we end and reverse deforestation. So to achieve that, we need to create economic incentives that keep trees in the ground. And this LEAF initiative, Lowering Emissions by Accelerating Forest Finance, brings together the demand and the supply side that will keep trees in the ground. So on the demand side, you've got companies that have got high quality, 1.5 degree aligned SBTI targets. And on the supply side, countries like Nepal who want to protect their own reservoirs of natural capital, their tropical forests. And there's strict rules around how this supply and demand is matched. On the demand side, we're only able to access LEAF if it comes on top of lowering our emissions through every other available mechanism. And on the supply side, payments are only being made to jurisdictions that are protecting their natural capital when those are thoroughly verified by independent parties. Now, I think everybody on LEAF, on the demand and the supply side, are aware that the best carbon storage technology that is available is nothing other than trees. Unilever has committed to end deforestation in our supply chain by 2023. Our value chain has got thousands of smallholder farmers in it, and LEAF doesn't just protect the natural capital, it protects their ability to make a living income or a living wage. And so we hope that LEAF will not only keep carbon in the ground, LEAF will end this false binary choice of choosing between the economy and the environment. So we now have many multinational corporations, over 20 corporations, that have made over $1 billion in pledges, with more to come. Most importantly, the total emissions reductions now have surpassed initial expectations. The Glasgow Leaders' Declaration on Forests and Land Use has now covered almost 90% of the world's forest estate across 110 countries, and these will be the focus areas for LEAF's work. So we can only achieve 1.5 degrees by ending deforestation, not pausing deforestation, not slowing deforestation, not fudging deforestation, but ending deforestation. That is Unilever's ambition, and Tarai, that is the ambition of LEAF.
Thank you. Thank you, Alan. So, Jing, you are the Global Policy and Advocacy Lead for Niatero, which works with indigenous peoples and local communities, helping them protect their lands and waters. And I, as a Nigerian who grew up in the Niger Delta, a region with one of the world's tropical forest systems juxtaposed on fossil-based extractive sectors, we have seen how delicate the nexus is between local community, capital, and the environment. How could carbon markets work well for those most affected, indigenous people and local communities?
Thank you, Iyaman Paria, for the question. Gawis ay agaw yu amin, sakun si Jing, nagapuak at busaw, isnan bilbilig, isnan Pilipinas. Kagagasing ko ay maki, gaggag ay kanda kayo, Idwani. I'm just greeting you in my indigenous language, the language of my ancestors from the mountains of Busao Mountain Province in the Philippines. And indigenous peoples, as you know, as Hindu has said earlier, have contributed the least to climate change, and yet we stand to suffer the most from its effects because of our close relationship with nature. We've heard the statistics. Although we are only 5% of the global population, our territories harbor 80% of the remaining biodiversity. We also have 22% of the above-ground carbon in our forests. This has been confirmed by intergovernmental science panels. They have recognized that indigenous peoples have been doing a good job related to biodiversity conservation and carbon sequestration. And various studies have confirmed that protection and recognition of tenure of indigenous peoples is the most efficient and effective way to protect the environment. So my organization, Niatero, recognizes the important role that indigenous peoples play in protecting the planet. We believe that where indigenous peoples are thriving, nature and ecosystems thrive as well. This is why we concentrate our work in supporting place-anchored peoples who maintain spiritual and reciprocal relationships with nature. We respect their self-determined visions of how their ecosystems should be maintained, and we also recognize and strengthen their governance so that they are able to carry out what they have been doing since time immemorial. Our partners believe that ocean is kin and that all beings within their ecosystems should be honored and are relatives. So voluntary carbon markets and the LEAF Coalition in particular, with its recognition of the Cancun safeguards, needs to honor this relationship and this spirituality and reciprocity. Therefore, jurisdictions that apply for LEAF must ensure that free, prior, and informed consent of indigenous peoples is sought and obtained before their territories can be included. And as we wait for Article 6 negotiations to be concluded, it is important for the voluntary carbon markets to show the way, to engage indigenous peoples as full partners, and to leverage what indigenous peoples have been doing since time immemorial, so that we reach the goals of the Paris Agreement as well as the UNFCCC. Thank you.
Thank you, Jing. Your Excellency, what is Nepal's vision for protecting its forests, and what role do you see for carbon markets?
Nepal envisions to increase its forest cover to 45% by 2030. Forest will play a key role in our net zero ambition to become carbon negative after 2045. Nepal's forest sector will increase its role as a carbon sink. We hope to attain net zero deforestation by 2030. Nepal has been a global leader on community forests. To build on this success, international climate finance is necessary. Therefore, Nepal supports Glasgow Declaration and believes that it will help unlock climate finance, reserves, forest biodiversity, loss, and play a vital role in achieving 1.5 degree Celsius goal. Voluntary carbon market will play an important role in our mitigation efforts. Nepal has been engaging in the Forest Carbon Partnership Facility since 2010. We are implementing emission reduction initiative to secure performance-based payment that will be equitably channeled to indigenous people, local communities through the benefit sharing mechanism. Nepal also gives importance to lowering carbon emissions and accelerating forest finance instruments. In all our engagement in utilizing the forest carbon market, Nepal gives high priority to maintaining social and environmental safeguards. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Excellency. Initiatives like the Public-Private LEAF Coalition herald a step change in the mobilization of private finance for our forests. Today's announcement that the LEAF Coalition has met its $1 billion target to mobilize finance for the protection of forests is a huge achievement. This announcement is an important step in building high-integrity voluntary carbon markets at scale. Crucially, though, these markets must and will be accessible, fair, and transparent. This will give clarity and confidence to all countries on the role that voluntary carbon markets can play in unlocking vital climate change finance and delivering ambitious NDCs. Most importantly, they'll be used by buyers in addition to ambition science-based decarbonization and not as an alternative. It's our role at the VCMI to raise the bar across the market, enabling a level playing field in which all buyers are clear in the role that high-integrity voluntary carbon markets can play in keeping 1.5 alive. Further details on the LEAF Coalition will be presented by governments, forest countries, and corporate participants during the course of the week, including Finance Day and at the high-level events hosted by the US on the 3rd and the Nordic Pavilion on the 5th. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you so much, Tahia, and thank you all for a very important session. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, may we continue to give them a round of applause. Thank you so much. It is now my pleasure to introduce a very important video outlining the incredible role that is being played by multilateral development banks, supporting the mobilization of finance in favor of forests. So please, may we play the video now.
The Asian Development Bank recognizes that protecting nature is essential to addressing climate change and building prosperity for all. We endorse this common agenda to mainstream nature across our operations.
Without nature, we have no life. Without life, we have no people. Without people, we have no planet. Let us save nature, people, and the planet. Let us give back to nature, for nature preserves all of us. Thank you very much.
On behalf of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, I'm pleased to endorse the joint statement of MDBs on nature, people, and planet, launched at COP26 today. In financing infrastructure for tomorrow, AIIB prioritizes green infrastructure, including integration of nature-based solutions to support economic development in Asia and beyond.
I am Jean Leon, President of the Caribbean Development Bank. It gives me great pleasure to fully support the MDB joint statement on nature, people, and planet. We commit to work diligently with our borrowing member countries to invest in nature-based solutions for enhancing resilience and promoting sustainable livelihoods.
Nature is at the foundation of our civilization. In the past 30 years, EBRD has set environmental protection as a key priority. With this statement on nature, people, and planet, we commit to do more to preserve our collective natural capital.
The European Investment Bank endorses the commitments on nature made in the joint statement, which will necessitate the convergence of our respective climate and biodiversity agendas in order to effectively respond to the two planetary emergencies. EIB stands ready to partner globally to make it happen.
Assalamu alaikum. On behalf of the Islamic Development Bank, it is my pleasure to endorse the joint MDB statement on nature, people, and planet.
Once again, another very exciting commitment that we have brought you today. It is now my pleasure to bring forward the President of the Inter-American Development Bank, Maurizio Claver Caron, on the Multilateral Development Bank's commitment to the Nature Positive Agenda. Please, Maurizio, join us on the stage. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and thank you, Prime Minister Johnson, and greetings to all of my fellow distinguished participants. And let me begin by thanking the Government of the United Kingdom for the hospitality and for convening this meeting, which is so important for all of us. Today, I am honored to represent a group of multilateral development banks that are committing to the goal of putting nature and climate at the heart of all the work we do. The banks signing today represent the leading edge of development assistance, and they include my own, the Inter-American Development Bank, the African Development Bank, the Asian Development Bank, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the Caribbean Development Bank, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, the European Investment Bank, the Islamic Development Bank, and of course, the World Bank Group. When the United Kingdom approached the IDB to lead the work in negotiating this joint statement on nature, people, and the planet, which we're endorsing today, it was really an important acknowledgement of two key points. First, that Latin America and the Caribbean plays a crucial role within the global imperative for bold action on climate change and nature. And second, it was an acknowledgement that the leaders hosting us today recognize the need to move from pledges to action, as we heard my friends President Duque and Prime Minister Motley so eloquently say on this stage. Most IDB countries are not major contributors to climate change, but more importantly, we're the biggest proponents of action to address it. Latin America and the Caribbean is both among the world's most biodiverse regions and the most at risk to climate impacts. And the ramifications of rising temperatures and the degradation of nature in our countries spill well beyond our borders. What happens in Latin America and the Caribbean affects the entire world. Climate change is jeopardizing the water and food sources that in our region nourish the world. They're endangering the CO2 sponges that are our rainforests, and they're threatening to unleash unprecedented climate-induced migration crises. Now, in recognizing this as an existential threat, all of us must be clear about the concrete actions required to protect Latin America, the Caribbean, and such, henceforth, the entire planet. Also, today serves as an acknowledgement of the IDB, of the Inter-American Development Bank's work. After a long history of advancing sustainable development models, we have redoubled our effort over the past year of my presidency to lead the climate and nature agendas focused on not words, rhetoric, but results. Not just commitments, but results. And that's precisely why action on climate change and biodiversity is enshrined at the core of our plan for the sustainable recovery and growth of Latin America and the Caribbean, what we call Vision 2025. For our region, as is the rest of the world, natural capital must be treated as the cornerstone of post-pandemic recovery, of an opportunity for a new era of sustainable, inclusive growth. And it's a fact that by protecting irreplaceable ecosystem services, we can create jobs, we can generate income, we can mobilize the private sector investment that is frankly essential to our hopes for a climate-positive future. It's a win-win-win. So we must acknowledge that every $1 million in nature-based investments creates more than 10 times the number of jobs that the equivalent would do of investment in fossil fuels. Again, it's a win-win. It's not a zero-sum game. Furthermore, we must leverage innovative financial tools and partnerships. We must generate bankable projects and tap into new resources to turn those statements into actions. And that's our goal. With today's signing, the MDBs are committing to further mainstream nature in our operations and in our strategies. And doing so is going to lead to more nature finance and more projects and instruments to reverse nature loss and promote the protection, restoration, and the sustainable use of resources. We affirm our goal to promote green financing tools and to build an understanding of dependencies in nature and the financial risks that are posed by nature loss. For the countries we serve in Latin America and the Caribbean, we are redoubling our pledges to help them develop policies, investment frameworks, and agreements that better value natural assets while also advancing climate goals. But we have to work together, including to support nature-based solutions within the nationally determined contributions and long-term strategies, such as the one, for example, that the IDB in France recently helped Colombia launch just here at COP26 yesterday. Today's MDB statement also underscores our goal to increasingly mobilize private finance for investments in nature. We at the IDB, we have an action plan to push well past Paris alignment and to help our countries do the same. In fact, our institution is taking the most aggressive approach in its 6-decade history on all of these fronts, from our growing Amazon initiative that emphasizes the bioeconomy, to blended finance models and accelerators that promote bio-businesses, and this is really exciting, to a new natural capital asset class, which we just listed on the Natural and the New York Stock Exchange, that's going to break all the old paradigms by rewarding countries and companies for nature positive management. I get so excited I almost break the mic. And so anyway, like everyone here listening, I'm hopeful that this year's COP, that here, the international community is not only going to be signing names to goals or make yet another commitment, but instead that we're agreeing to take concrete and ambitious steps to realize the development potential of green and nature in recovery. And that's the message from the group of multilateral development banks here today. And the message is we must truly use our important commitments on nature and climate as catalysts for emboldened action and a new way of operating. So I, along with my colleagues, am proud to endorse this statement and to continue working with all the MDBs to realize ambitious results. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for your commitment. Thank you for speaking about turning words into action. There are many who have questioned the validity of these commitments, and let's be clear, we've gone far beyond any commitments ever made with regard to the protection of forests, the regeneration, and it is because of the efforts of both the public and the private sector that we have seen this come to fruition. This marks the end of our first session. I would now like to invite the world leaders who are here to go to the VIP room for a family photo. Those of you who would like to stay during the break, and I urge you not to leave, you will see that we will play a video with some leaders that you will never potentially have believed would come behind, once again, this Glasgow Declaration. The point is, we now have more than 110 leaders that have signed, and some of those leaders will be here in this video. So I urge you to stay. Those of you who will be joining us, please join us again at 11:20 sharp, where we will open also with His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales. Thank you, distinguished guests, for your attention.
Forests don't just matter. They are crucial for the survival of all species, human beings included. Forests contribute to mitigating greenhouse gases emissions, adapting to the impacts of climate change, and protecting water sources and biodiversity. In Colombia, 52% of our territory is covered with forest. That is why we have committed to zero deforestation by 2030, especially because 15% of GHG global emissions come from cutting down tropical forests. Achieving the ambitious goals that we have set upon ourselves across the different environmental agreements will depend on our effectiveness to protect the forests. We must renew our commitment to defend forests and increase efforts with concrete actions in agriculture, sustainable consumption and production, and international finance. Now is the time to fight climate change, which requires urgent actions by all countries. This is our moment. This is our time. We must all act together.
Уважаемый господин премьер-министр, дамы и господа, рад возможности приветствовать участников заседания по вопросам управления лесным хозяйством и землепользованием. Убежден, сохранение лесов и других природных экосистем является одной из ключевых составляющих международных усилий по решению проблемы глобального потепления, сокращению эмиссии парниковых газов. Эта тема органично вписывается в многоплановую повестку дня климатической конференции в Глазго. Поставив задачу построения углеродно-нейтральной экономики не позднее 2060 года, Россия опирается в том числе и на уникальный ресурс имеющихся у нас лесных экосистем. Их значительный потенциал по поглощению углекислого газа и выработке кислорода. Ведь в нашей стране расположено около 20% всех мировых лесных массивов. Мы принимаем самые серьезные и энергичные меры для их сохранения. Совершенствуем управление лесным хозяйством. Боремся с незаконными вырубками и лесными пожарами. Увеличиваем площади лесовосстановления. Последовательно наращиваем финансирование на эти цели. Россия поддерживает предложенный к утверждению на сегодняшнем заседании проект совместной декларации по лесам и землепользованию. Рассчитываем, что ее реализация будет стимулировать более тесное партнерство всех заинтересованных государств в деле сбережения лесов. Это, несомненно, послужит достижению целей Парижского соглашения по снижению содержания углекислого газа в атмосфере. Хотел бы пожелать всем нам успехов на этом пути и всего самого доброго. Благодарю вас за внимание.
Florestas são importantes para mim porque cobrem mais de 60% do meu país. São fonte de saúde e vida e abrigam as maiores riquezas naturais e a maior biodiversidade do planeta. Assumimos o compromisso de eliminar o desmatamento ilegal até 2030. Faço um chamado a todos os países para que ajude a defender todas as florestas, inclusive com recursos adequados, em benefício de todos.
Forests matter to me because Canada is the third most forested country in the world. La nature fait partie de notre identité. Canada is working to protect 30% of our lands and oceans by 2030. We're planting 2 billion trees. We're protecting and restoring wetlands, grasslands, and peatlands. And we're supporting Indigenous-led conservation and guardian programs. Ensemble, luttons contre les changements climatiques et la crise de la nature.
El Perú cuenta con 72 millones de hectáreas de bosques naturales. En el 56% de nuestro territorio se encuentran los pueblos indígenas que conviven con una flora y fauna mega diversa de la que viven y de la que los protegen ellos mismos. Por ello, el Perú apoya la declaración de Glasgow sobre los bosques, en tanto expresa nuestro compromiso en materia de conservación y uso sostenible de nuestra Amazonía en el contexto del cambio climático y la lucha contra la deforestación.
Les forêts et les tourbières du bassin du Congo, qui séquestrent la plus importante réserve de carbone au monde, constituent désormais la vanne d'aération essentielle et l'ultime bouclier écologique au service de l'Afrique et de l'humanité entière. Mon pays, la République du Congo, qui œuvre aux côtés d'autres États frères à la préservation et à la gestion durable de ces écosystèmes forestiers, en appelle à la solidarité agissante des partenaires techniques et financiers, ainsi qu'au respect des engagements pris dans le cadre de l'accord de Paris, à l'effet de préserver durablement ce patrimoine commun.
Hello all. Papua New Guinea is home to 6 to 7% of world's biodiversity and the third largest tropical rainforest of the world, the lungs of the earth. The world needs oxygen. We need biodiversity for world's healing. We need our oceans to be healthy and pollution-free. And as the current chair of the Coalition for the Rainforest Nations, we stand committed to contributing to and ensuring that we keep the Paris Agreement goal alive and achievable. We believe that mobilizing resources and forces
of climate change, land degradation, resource depletion, pollution, and insect decline. Here, the 30 by 30 biodiversity target is truly critical. To support that objective, I helped to establish something called the Natural Capital Investment Alliance as part of my Sustainable Markets Initiative in order to help develop natural capital as an investment theme and as a means of mobilizing the world's financing and investment communities. But I believe you'll be discussing the details behind the NCIA after I have left here. The second action the world needs as a real matter of priority and justice is to safeguard and honor the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities who depend on the forests for their lives and livelihoods, and who are themselves wise and experienced custodians. In fact, I'm wearing what I've been given earlier when I met them, and this one comes from Ecuador. The virtuous circle of nature is something the world's indigenous peoples hold sacred and understand only too well, and is why we should listen to and learn from their profound intuitive wisdom. By contrast, we seem to have lost that vital sixth sense which should have prevented us from abusing nature in the first place. Today, though, we will hear from forest leaders and donors committed to fulfilling this promise. We thank those leaders for their bravery, their courage, and their commitment to protect their forests and the rich biodiversity that exists within them, despite all the dangers and obstacles placed in their way. The third important action we need to take is the implementation of an accelerated and serious global shift in how we produce and consume goods, decoupling this production and consumption from further loss of forests and other vital ecosystems. I'm therefore delighted we will be joined by leaders committed to shifting to new and more sustainable practices in this area. There is every hope that we can build a more circular, resilient economy, which is better for people as well as for the forests on which we all depend. After all, nature is estimated to contribute some $125 trillion to the global economy annually, if you can ever actually put a real value on it. And everything we use, produce, and purchase ultimately has been created from nature's inputs. In a circular bioeconomy, this requires taking a system-led view of global value chains. The shift to renewable bio-based solutions is therefore an opportunity to rethink industries so that they become nature positive and climate neutral while providing new jobs and more inclusive prosperity. All these measures would shift our economy onto a more sustainable trajectory. And there are now signs that there is, at last, growing interest in investing in these solutions across both public and private sectors. However, if we want to see tangible and rapid results on the ground, and I'm afraid I do after years of frustrated effort, then we need to articulate and demonstrate the immediate and long-term value of these investments. This is why I established the Circular Bioeconomy Alliance last year to connect the dots between investors and local communities in order to create regenerative and inclusive landscapes and sustainable value chains that work for nature and people. Frankly, we've all had enough talking, so we need to put our words and commitments into practice. This is why, while I speak, the Circular Bioeconomy Alliance is working with local communities in 4 continents to restore thousands of hectares in more than 10 countries to deliver practical solutions through initially what we are calling living laboratories. By doing so, we will, I hope, inspire an entire generation of humanity who will be equipped to make the changes we so desperately need. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, and I cannot believe how many times I've ended speeches like this all over the world during the past 40 years, and to no avail, but I can only pray that this time, this session will provide us with a real sense of the seriously urgent systemic shifts that need to happen to deliver on our vision. And I urge you all to take forward the work we discussed today with implacable resolve and determination to make things happen on the ground. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much. We'll go back out that way. Yes. Once again, the wise words of His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales. Not only is he a force of nature, but he is one of our greatest forces for nature. I would like to now bring forward the next panel that will very much open up this session to talk about the global financial system and the way in which we truly do activate this declaration in terms of capital and financial flows. Mary Shapiro, co-chair of the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure, who will moderate this session. Mary, please join me. Jennifer Morris, President and CEO of the Nature Conservancy. Dame Elizabeth Corley, Chair-Designate of Shoulders. Fernanda Melpo, CEO of Duagro. Sakir Nusebe, International CEO of Federated Hermes. Frank Elderson, Chair of the Network of the Greening the Financial System, welcome. And the President of Finland, Sauli Niinisto, welcome. And I will now allow for Mary to chair this session. Thank you.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's an honor to join you here today. This conference could be pivotal in the fight against climate change, and it will be if we turn ambition into action. I hope this climate summit marks a moment where we put forests at the center of our efforts to tackle the twin crises of climate change and biodiversity loss. For Finland, this topic is particularly close to heart. 75% of our area is covered with forests. In many ways, forests are our lifeline. They have been fundamental to our economic and social development and are perhaps one of the reasons Finland is the happiest country in the world. Moreover, forests play a big role in achieving our target of climate neutrality in 2035. As our society has changed, the forest economy has moved from timber to value-added wood products. Latest innovations include wood fibers that can replace cotton in textile production. Also, in construction and packaging, wood-based products offer sustainable alternatives. Finland's forest resources are continuously growing. The annual increment of forests has more than doubled since the 1950s. Every year, 150 million trees are planted in Finland. During a decade, that means more than 1 billion. In the EU, the aim is to double the amount of trees grown annually from 300 million to 600 million. Our example shows that it is possible to benefit from our forests economically, while also increasing their positive climate impact. In many ways, forests are a good investment. We continue to invest in our forests. Currently, we are running a €96 million program to investigate and pilot climate mitigation and adaptation measures in the land use sector. We also cooperate with numerous countries on how to use forests for the benefit of both the economy and climate. Most recently, I discussed the topic with President Putin. At a global level, Finnfund, a Finnish impact investor, is investing in sustainable forestry in developing countries. Finnfund is the first development financing institution with net emission negative investment portfolio based on a large share of forestry in the portfolio. Ladies and gentlemen, delivering a transition towards a forest-positive global economy is not an easy task, but Finland's example shows that it is possible. We stand ready to share our expertise. This topic warrants the attention of world leaders. It is always worthwhile to invest in forests. Thank you.
Closer. I'm sorry. Much better. Your Excellency, thank you so much for your words, which have given us a very powerful framing for our conversation. Before we turn to our panel, we have a very brief film to share.
The trading floors of the major stock exchanges and the forest floors may seem worlds apart, but decisions made by investors have consequences that ripple around the globe. They can be a powerful force in helping to protect and restore our forests and limit global warming to within 1.5 degrees.
The financial sector is, of course, at the heart of the entire energy and land use sector transition for the simple reason, whatever gets financed gets built, or whatever gets financed gets grown.
This last year has shown what's possible with trillions of dollars of net zero commitments from financial institutions. But we mustn't stop there.
Agriculture is the biggest driver of tropical deforestation. Financial institutions provide the trillions of dollars of finance needed throughout agricultural supply chains to enable the production, trade, and use of commodities around the world. How this finance flows is critical to the future of forests and to communities.
So just like we have to take carbon out of the energy sector, we have to take deforestation out of the food system.
So what is the international financial system doing to tackle forest loss and degradation?
One of the key priorities is to ensure that financial institutions fully understand the land use sector is part and parcel of climate risk.
By 2050, nearly 40% of cropland could be exposed to severe drought, leading to large declines in yields. This poses a risk to food security and ultimately to investors. There are also legal and policy risks. Secondly, financial institutions are already taking decisions to manage risk and align their portfolios to support a nature-positive economy.
We need to make sure that they are managing climate and biodiversity risks, including risks associated with deforestation. But we also want to make sure that our investments, our insurance underwriting practices, do not add extra pressures.
Finally, there are hundreds of trillions of dollars of global capital that could net zero, nature-positive economy. These investments could boost productivity, create new jobs, and secure incomes for millions of people worldwide.
o nosso propósito maior: produzir alimentos de uma forma sustentável, socialmente correta.
Moving forward, we will need a better understanding of the value of nature's services to help inform financial and economic decision-making.
Financial institutions will also need the right tools and data to analyze and manage risk in the sector, but also bolster and seize opportunities to invest in forest-positive economies.
As policies create the enabling conditions for sustainable finance, so the opportunities and incentives to scale investment in the green economy will grow.
E eu acho que a parceria maior está junto às grandes empresas, né, que consomem, também fazer o diferencial, vir buscar a história, a rastreabilidade dos produtos produzidos e de que forma eles estão sendo produzidos.
The business case is clear.
Now is the time for action. Now is the time for those watching this to be the necessary heroes of today and lead the world into a deforestation-free financial sector.
So let's get to work.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is a privilege to be with you all today and to be part of this event at an important turning point for our planet. As we have heard, the science is clear. We cannot stay within 1.5 degrees without serious and urgent action, including through protecting the world's forests. And as the Glasgow Declaration on Forests and Land Use makes clear, in order to protect and restore the world's forests, we must realign private financial flows to catalyze a forest-positive future. There is no doubt this will be challenging. But my role as head of the Secretariat for the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures has reaffirmed my conviction that capital markets can and must work in the interests of people and the planet. It has also made me optimistic that the changes required to guard and restore the world's natural systems upon which we all depend can happen and quickly. And disclosure is the first step to making this possible. Through transparency into the financial impacts of climate change, markets can allocate capital to businesses that prioritize resilience and sustainability. 5 years ago, few would have believed that disclosing climate risks would be mainstream across global financial systems and that 9 jurisdictions would be on track to enforce TCFD-aligned climate reporting requirements. But they have. To date, much of our thinking about the transition to net zero has focused on defining transition pathways for the energy and transport sectors, and for good reason, as these sectors are critical to achieving transition. But we must expand our horizon and pay more attention to the agriculture, forest, and land.
We make sure that we can get the right finance to the right places in time. So many of you who've been in this field for a while, as I have, may remember the 2014 New York Declaration on Forests. At that time, over 200 signatories signed up to end deforestation in the tropics by 2020. 2020 has come and gone, and not one of those companies was able to fulfill that pledge. So is past prologue? What can we learn from those experiences? What's different today? One thing that's very different is the TCFD. And I want to salute the member companies that have signed up to this incredibly important thing, because it's not just voluntary. It is now, but we're looking to see that it actually becomes mandatory in major markets where trillions of dollars of capital will be looking at the risk that they have in their portfolios as a direct result of climate change. So that's different. We're moving climate risk from ESG and CSR to actually DNA of companies. But the second really key part is, how do we get financing down to where it matters? That was one of the biggest lessons from the New York Declaration on Forests. And I'd love to hear about what some of the efforts that are happening. But there's really 3 things that we're seeing that's missing, that we need to make sure that financial institutions have on the ground. That's increased transparency, so we know where the money is flowing, so we not only name and shame companies, but we actually can recognize and support their efforts to end deforestation in their supply chains. The second thing is farmers need patient, appropriate capital. We have to understand deeply these supply chains and provide farmers with access to money that they need that fits with their production cycles. These are critical, critical elements. And finally, the KISS principle. Keep it simple. Sometimes these loan applications are just too much for farmers, so they end up borrowing from money lenders at very egregious rates. If we don't fix the financial problem, we cannot save our forests. And I know none of us in this room want to have the legacy of not achieving and implementing on these commitments. It's for all of us, it's for our future and our children's future. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. And thank you for your kind words about TCFD. I want to thank all of you for your brilliant contributions. And listening to you, I'm really struck by how much already is happening. We already have many tools we need to understand, manage, and mitigate climate risk, particularly in agriculture, forest, and land use, as part of the broader transition to the net zero economy. We see a strong commitment to act from the financial sector itself, developing and publishing scientifically grounded policies and milestones to guide the transition to forest-positive portfolios. Today, we have seen more than 30 major financial institutions with nearly $7 trillion of assets under management send a really significant signal that private finance fully grasps its role in tackling the challenge of forest loss and degradation. And finally, we have seen financial institutions coming together with business, development finance institutions, and the multilateral development banks, mobilizing billions of dollars and developing the tools needed to scale investment in a more sustainable, forest-positive future. But today needs to be just the beginning, not the end of this journey. I hope that 5 years from now, the agriculture and land use sector will be at the heart of our policy on managing climate risk. The tackling deforestation risk will be a routine part of financial institutions' policies and practice. And most importantly, investment in sustainable food and agriculture and the bioeconomy will have scaled beyond our current imagining. This future is possible. Together, we can make it a reality. Thank you all for your time today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mary. And thank you to the whole panel. Very much appreciate your commitment. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to introduce, as we now shift into the next session, the Prime Minister of Norway, Jonas Gahr Støre. Prime Minister, please come to the lectern.
Thank you, Madam President, Your Royal Highness, Presidents and Prime Ministers, ladies and gentlemen. There is progress being made at this COP. We can feel that after this session and the attention being given to this critical theme. We need to address the twin crisis of climate change and nature loss at the same time, and I believe we can find solutions to both. For my government, climate and environmental considerations will be at the core of all policy areas in our government undertakings. We cannot solve the climate crisis without stopping tropical deforestation. So there's a win-win here that we need to grasp. Deforestation leads to climate change, nature loss and human suffering. Reducing deforestation is no easy task, but it will have and it may have a triple positive effect for people, for the climate and for nature. So addressing deforestation requires tough decisions to regulate land use and enforce legislation. We need a just rural transition that benefits people. And that change needs to be socially equitable. We are mobilizing finance to support governments, indigenous peoples and local communities in protecting forests. I am encouraged by the progress being made by many tropical forest countries. I was in government 15 years ago when many of these initiatives started, and they have come afar when we now enter the 2020s. I'm pleased to see new partnerships forming to support forest countries in their further efforts. The joint public finance pledge we are making today is in fact unprecedented. But perhaps even more exciting is the LEAF Coalition's breakthrough in mobilizing private finance. Some of the world's largest companies stand ready to reward tropical forest countries that reduce deforestation. These companies are doing this voluntarily, in addition to making deep cuts in their own emissions. Another win-win. And this is, as we know it in the Nordic region, public-private collaboration at its best. With our partners, Norway is making high-resolution satellite imagery available to everyone, anywhere, and for free. This improves policy-making and helps to hold companies accountable. And it empowers indigenous peoples and local communities. It strengthens the position of environmental defenders who risk their lives for the sake of forests. I am encouraged by the new commitments from commodity traders to eliminate deforestation from their supply chains. So many of the dots are now being connected, Madam President. I'm glad to see that financial markets are incorporated forest-related financial risks in their investment decisions. This is, in fact, an acknowledgement that climate risk is a financial risk and must be managed as such. We need data and transparency if markets are to reduce pressure on tropical forests. To protect forests, we must empower the people who live in them. This is a matter of social justice. The evidence shows that strengthening the rights of indigenous peoples reduces deforestation. And only a fraction of indigenous communities have secure tenure rights. This has to change with the other changes we are encouraging. I commend, let me do that at this occasion, the leadership shown by Costa Rica and other countries. I have listened with interest to the vision presented by indigenous leaders here today, on stage and backstage, and Norway is fully committed to supporting their efforts. I'm honored to announce a collective pledge of $1.7 billion to strengthen the rights of indigenous peoples. The donor group behind this pledge is seeking to reinforce your role as guardians of forests and nature. We will support national land and forest tenure reform processes, and we will support indigenous governance structures and sustainable livelihoods. This is, in fact, a matter of economics, a matter of politics, but deep down it is a matter of ethics. And it is a matter of living up to the objective of this conference, keeping the 1.5 degrees vision alive. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Prime Minister, and for opening this session up so well. Again, Norway's commitment not only to forests, but also to the people that depend on our forests and protect our forests. Ahead of the next session, which will be speaking about the role of Indigenous people and communities, we would like to celebrate the role of these people and the role that they play in the world's forests. In this special video, which is titled Voices from the Forest. Another inspirational video. Now we're going to sit down and have a discussion, which I hope you will find just as fascinating as all the other conversations and commitments that we've seen today. We all know the important role of Indigenous people as guardians of the world's forests, and we know that this is more vital than ever. So I would like to ask Tuntiak Katan, Vice Coordinator of Indigenous Organizations of the Amazon River Basin and General Coordinator of the Global Alliance of Territorial Communities, as our first speaker today. Patrick Hemedi, National Coordinator Dynamique des Groupes des Peuples Autochtones. President of Costa Rica, Carlos Alvarado. Darren Walker, President of the Ford Foundation. And Joan Carling, Global Director of Indigenous Peoples' Rights International. Tuntiak, could I ask you to inspire us, and you may use the lectern, if you would like, which is to your left. Use the lectern, or you can stay where you are, what you prefer.
Mi nombre es Tuntiak Katan, soy hijo del pueblo Shuar de la Amazonía ecuatoriana. Soy vicecoordinador de la COICA y coordinador general de la Alianza Global de Comunidades Territoriales, constituido por AMAN, REPALEC, AMPB, APIP y COICA. Todos juntos, esta Alianza Global de Comunidades Territoriales, tenemos 950 millones de hectáreas de bosques tropicales en el mundo. Ahora vengo a ser la voz de los niños, jóvenes, mujeres, ancianos que están en el territorio, en diferentes partes de los bosques tropicales. A decirles que la ciencia ya está reconociendo que los pueblos indígenas somos los mejores protectores de la selva, de la biodiversidad. Que la ciencia está diciendo que los ecosistemas del mundo están a punto de no retorno. Venimos aquí a decir a Glasgow, a decir a los líderes mundiales de todo el planeta, a los gobernantes. Los pueblos indígenas venimos acá para hacer un pacto de vida, porque ya no hay tiempo. A decirles que no hagan promesas políticas que no van a cumplir, para decirles que no hagan anuncios financieros, climáticos, si no van a trabajar con la gente, con los pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales. Por lo tanto, les pedimos 5 cosas a los líderes mundiales. Intensificar el derecho de los territorios de los pueblos indígenas y comunidades locales. Queremos garantía de vida en nuestros territorios. Queremos el respeto de los líderes, de los voceros indígenas, de los protectores. No nos asesinen, no nos maten. Si los proyectos se van a realizar en el territorio, se hagan mediante consulta y consentimiento, que es lo fundamental. Y les decimos, necesitamos valorar y necesitan valorar y apoyar los conocimientos y la ciencia de los pueblos indígenas. Eso significa reconocer las contribuciones determinadas de los territorios indígenas con sus bosques. Así que venimos con unas propuestas concretas a decir, trabajemos juntos. La decisión que tomemos hoy será la diferencia, si vamos a vivir o vamos a perecer todos. Por eso, la propuesta desde la juventud, desde la niñez, desde las mujeres, desde los ancianos, levantamos la voz y decimos, empecemos ya todos juntos. Todos juntos tenemos que subir en esta canoa desde la selva, desde la cuenca del Congo, desde Mesoamérica, que nos tiene que salvar a todos. Por eso, la acción es ahora, hermanos y hermanas. A nombre de todos los pueblos indígenas, de los bosques tropicales, decirles, aquí estamos y vamos a actuar ya. Muchas gracias. Buenas tardes.
Muchas gracias, Toniak. I don't think that there is a louder voice right now in this very important room, calling out for the rights of Indigenous people, calling out for the fact that there is no more time, and for us to translate the incredible words that we have heard this morning and that we will continue to hear during the next 2 weeks into action. Thank you for your call to action and asking us to all get into the canoe together, wherever we may be. I would like to now pass to President Carlos Alvarado Quezada, a president of a country that has shown for much time that protecting nature is absolutely fundamental to the protection not only of your people, but of people across the globe, and also recognized by your recent Earthshot Award. President, as a country rich with forests and a large indigenous population, why do you see protecting land rights as important?
Thank you, and I want to salute and thank my colleagues here. We need to protect those because of the voice we just heard and voices around the world that are similar. I'd like to share my personal journey in this. When I was a freshman going out of university, I started working in a place by accident called FONAFIFO, which is the National Forestry Fund of Costa Rica. Sorry, I was a journalist, just graduated, but I ended up working there, and they told me, okay, we have this new concept we need to communicate. It's called environmental services. And I asked, what is it, environmental services? They say, okay, forests provide services to communities and humanity. That was more than 20 years ago. And I was like, okay, I thought for 1 second, this is like selling air. This is bluffing. They say, no. Okay, the concept is this. Forests take care of water. They protect water, so they're good for production. That's one service. Forests are home to various species, animals, plants. So you have a protection of biodiversity. At that time, biodiversity was not as valued as today, for example, when we see this great loss of biodiversity. Forests also fix carbon in the fight against climate change, 20 years ago. And they also are good for the economy because they provide ecosystems in which people could have tourism and productive activities. So I started working on that. And as going forward in payment for environmental services, which is now recognized with the Earthshot, one of the areas that was not yet explored was the payment of environmental services for indigenous communities and local communities. Because it is true that the main guardians of forest and land are indigenous communities, because the knowledge of how to balance the ecosystems and livelihoods, it's not equal. I mean, that concept, those concepts are not present after Industrial Revolution. It's just about production. The other knowledge before that, that knowledge of our indigenous people, it's about sustainability. So that is key. And in Costa Rica, we're using that scheme, and currently payment for environmental services goes to indigenous communities that actually protect those forests. And we get those services with fixed carbon, which we know we need to do now. We protect biodiversity, and that's one of the key elements of how Costa Rica went in 1980s from 20% of forest coverage to currently having more than 50% of forest coverage. That's one of the key traits of how we managed to do that. And also, in terms of biodiversity, when the world has lost about 40% of biomass, of biodiversity, following the trend of the forest, we have recovered approximately 40% of wildlife biomass due to forest protection, and that's how we managed to do that with protection of land and hand in hand with indigenous people. So that's a bit of it, a little bit of my journey, personal journey, but also hand in hand with our country's been doing.
Thank you so much, President. And we know that storytelling is absolutely fundamental, and the importance also of paying environmental services to those that are the stewards of the land. Thank you for that personal journey. Speaking of paying, I would like to turn to the perspective of a philanthropist and to speak to you, Darren, as the president of the Ford Foundation, thinking of new funding mechanisms to channel money to indigenous peoples and communities. Why is your foundation taking on a major commitment on this issue?
Well, thank you, and I'm so grateful to be on this panel with my esteemed colleagues. Let me say that today is historic for two reasons. It is historic because of the announcement of an unprecedented $1.7 billion raised in a fund specifically earmarked for support for indigenous peoples and local communities, the first of its kind. Today is also historic because we have seen something unprecedented. Tanteak, you spoke here on the stage of the world leaders. Indigenous peoples have been fighting to get in the room, to get a seat at the table. And today is unprecedented because, yes, we are focused on forests and lands, but we know that without a focus on indigenous peoples, local communities, Afro-descendants, we will not rise to the challenge. So we have work to do. We have work to ensure that as policy gets made, we center and invest in the leadership, the capacity building, the power of indigenous leaders, that they no longer will stand outside of the room asking to be allowed in, but that we as donors recognize that without a focus and centering them, there is not going to be a solution to this climate challenge. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Darren. And so true, again, that we must have people at the table from all different indigenous communities, different genders, and a real diversity so that we can truly solve the complexity of the problems that we have in front of us. Patrick, this donor pledge presents a big acknowledgement from donors of the need to support indigenous and forest communities. As an indigenous leader from the DRC region, What is your thinking? Why is this so important to you?
Chers dirigeants mondiaux et décideurs, chers collègues, sœurs et sœurs autochtones, je m'appelle Patrick Saïdi, je viens de la République démocratique du Congo, je suis coordonnateur national de la dynamique des groupes des peuples autochtones. Ici, je représente les organisations autochtones vivant dans la forêt du bassin du Congo, le deuxième plus grand massif tropical forestier au monde. Nous saluons effectivement la mobilisation des fonds internationaux pour sécuriser les droits à la terre des autochtones. Si nous voulons tous renforcer la gestion des territoires forestiers par les autochtones comme une solution efficace aux crises climatiques et de la biodiversité, cette sécurisation des droits à la terre est une condition préalable et fondamentale. Les promesses financières que vous faites et la volonté politique que vous affichez ici à Glasgow doivent maintenant se matérialiser sur le terrain. Des mécanismes efficaces doivent être mis en place pour garantir que les ressources mobilisées atteignent véritablement et prioritairement les communautés autochtones et locales. Mon pays, la RDC, s'est engagé à devenir un leader mondial du climat avec le slogan RDC Pays Solution. Le président Félix Tshisekedi s'est engagé à sécuriser les terres des autochtones et c'est suivant leur volonté et sous leur contrôle. Le Parlement s'apprête à voter une loi spécifique en faveur des peuples autochtones reconnaissant leurs droits à la terre et aux ressources. Ceci est une contribution majeure dans la lutte contre le changement climatique. D'autres pays doivent suivre cet exemple. Nous nous joignons à vous et à nos frères et sœurs des pays forestiers tropicaux pour aider nos gouvernements à entreprendre des initiatives durables qui préserveront nos forêts. Si vous aspirez à un développement durable, il faut sécuriser les droits à la terre des autochtones et leur système de gouvernance pour une protection efficace des forêts. Car sans forêt, nous ne saurons pas faire face au changement climatique et nous ne connaîtrons pas le développement. Merci.
Merci Patrick pour vos mots tellement inspirants. Et maintenant, I would like to turn to Joan. Joan, I want to give you the last word. This commitment is something that Indigenous people and local forest communities have been asking for a long time. What do you think is most critical with regard to this pledge? And how can we truly have it change things on the ground, as we've been asked also by Tantiak and many others, to ensure that this becomes not just words, but true actions?
Thank you for that. We welcome today's global commitment to strengthen the forest tenure of Indigenous peoples and local communities. Should this investment lead to appropriate policies and investments, this will certainly make profound changes on the ground. We expect this commitment to ensure forest tenure and conservation of at least 500 million hectares of forest managed by Indigenous peoples and local communities. We should also support actions to protect boreal forest. As guardians of the forest, we look forward to a new partnership based on respect, solidarity, and cooperation expressed in concrete policy actions and investments that will protect our rights and enhance our reciprocal and interdependent relationship with nature, and will thereby propel the conservation of forests and ecosystems, not only for us, but for all humanity. We need to ensure that this commitment is fully aligned to broader policies and actions to combat climate change. We call for policy coherence and strong implementation of states and other actors. Yet each day, we are losing our forests and we are being persecuted due to powerful vested interest and the lack of political will. We urgently need you, the world leaders today, to act now to stop this devastation and criminalization. Finally, we urge you to build with us today the transformational partnerships that begin with the respect for our rights. With nature reaching a tipping point, your collective actions now to save the world's forests and biodiversity will determine our future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joan. Thank you also for the reminder of solidarity and mutual respect for Indigenous rights and the importance, again, that we must listen and protect Indigenous people. I know as well, and our thoughts go to many of the most vulnerable Indigenous people who have lost their lives during the COVID pandemic. I would like to thank the panel for the depth of your storytelling and your commitments and your call to action. And may I ask you now to get up and move towards the left and exit. Thank you very much. As always, we can get inspired by the sounds of nature. Ladies and gentlemen, it's truly a pleasure to introduce the next panel. Here we are going to speak about sustainable consumption and production, and as some of you know, as co-president of the Club of Rome, consumption is absolutely essential for all of us who have been speaking about the need to shift our consumption and production patterns. So it is my great pleasure to introduce to you three very prominent leaders within this field. The President of Ghana, Nana Akufo-Addo, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, Director General of the World Trade Organization, and Børge Brende from the World Economic Forum as CEO will be obviously giving us the importance of what the private sector can do in terms of shifting our economies. So thank you, and Ngozi, you will be facilitating this session.
Yes.
So you are wanting to come to the lectern, please do.
Okay. Thank you so much. Well, thank you so much for that. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me make 3 key points before I hand over to the panel. The first point I'd like to make about trade and forest and land use is that trade can and must make a positive contribution to halting deforestation and supporting more sustainable markets for forest and farm goods as part of a comprehensive and ambitious climate action agenda. Forests are critical for biodiversity conservation, carbon sequestration, and the maintenance of ecosystems. But the proportion of forest area fell dramatically between 2000 to 2020, resulting in a net loss of 100 million hectares of the world's forests. Policies affecting trade and markets must advance multiple goals, including safeguarding biodiversity, supporting climate action, promoting food security, creating jobs and raising incomes, and supporting viable, dynamic, and competitive markets. Passing and implementing robust environmental legislation can ensure that forest products and agricultural goods reflect their true costs when these products are traded on domestic or international markets. This can enable trade to play a positive role in contributing to mitigation and adaptation efforts as part of a comprehensive and ambitious climate action agenda. My second point is that governments can help tackle deforestation by reforming subsidies that create perverse incentives on global markets. Governments can help support more sustainable, equitable, and efficient global markets by reforming subsidies that create perverse incentives for market actors, including in areas such as fossil fuels, agriculture, and fisheries. Doing so would improve the allocation of scarce global resources, as well as contributing to the competitiveness, sustainability, and resilience of communities in both rural and urban areas. My third point is that trade has an essential role to play in the just and inclusive food system transformation that we need. As rising incomes, demographic change, and evolving diets continue to shape markets for food and agriculture, trade has an important role to play in enabling food producers to respond to rising demand without exacerbating pressure on forests, other carbon sinks, and other biodiversity-rich ecosystems. Digital trade and services can also contribute directly to improving sustainable forest management and land use by expanding access to technologies that can support conservation and monitoring efforts. It is important in this process of promoting sustainable and deforestation-free value chains to adopt a positive and collaborative approach through non-discriminatory, comprehensive, and ambitious policies that help ensure a just and inclusive transition. As the UK and Indonesian governments pointed out, this could lead to markets worth up to $5 trillion a year in trade by 2030 for the millions of people who already rely on agriculture and forestry for their livelihoods. But it's not only governments that have to act. The private sector, including the world commodity traders, must play a role. I therefore welcome the FACT Dialogue Roadmap announced today by the UK's Prime Minister Boris Johnson and Indonesia as an opportunity to deepen understanding and to build trust, partnership and collaboration around action. So now, without further ado, let me turn to our first speaker, His Excellency President Nana Akufo-Addo of Ghana, a dynamic, progressive leader who is determined to show that cocoa can be produced sustainably. Your Excellency, please.
Our excellent moderator, Excellencies, I thank the British Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Boris Johnson, for the invitation to be part of this event, which is raising awareness about the importance of preserving our forests and winning the fight against climate change. In Ghana today, deforestation and forest degradation are the greatest challenges to sustainable forest management. The consequential effect of deforestation and forest degradation has proved to be severe climate change, which has dire consequences for our livelihoods, specifically the drying up of our water bodies, the pollution of our waters, loss of our prime timber species, loss of biodiversity, and change in rainfall patterns and weather conditions in the country. We realize that there is an urgent need to reverse the trend and restore our forest resources as much as possible back to their original state. We do not have to tomorrow or the day after tomorrow to do this, and that is why we're acting now. Ghana has, in the course of the last 2 decades, adopted several policies and programs aimed at restoring our forest. Between 2002 and 2020, under the National Forest Plantation Development Program and the Ghana Forest Plantation Strategy, some 580,000 hectares of plantations have been established. Again, through the Youth in Afforestation Program, we're committed to reclaiming some 7.6 million hectares of degraded forest and farmlands. In June this year, I led the entire country through the Green Ghana project to plant over 7 million trees, far above the 5 million we had targeted. Next.
This is essential if we are to keep the 1.5 degrees alive and protect and restore our forests and enhance livelihoods for those who live and work in these landscapes. Eliminating deforestation from global agriculture supply chains is critical to achieving net zero emissions by 2050. The companies who have combined an annual revenue of $500 billion have committed to create a shared roadmap for supply chain action that is consistent with a 1.5 degree pathway. The joint statement of action is a powerful example on how the private sector can be agents of transformation alongside governments, the finance sector, civil society, and communities. I would like to thank all the companies and their CEOs. They are ADM, Amaji, Bunge, Cargill, Golden Agri-Resources, JBS, Louis Dreyfus Company, Ulam, Viterra, and Wilmar. Collectively, they handle more than half of global trade in the key commodities such as soy and palm oil. So this really makes a real difference when they do commit to also no deforestation in the future. The companies have committed to explore how they can jointly accelerate implementation of existing commitments to zero deforestation, how they can increase transparency on their Scope 3 emissions, how they can improve the livelihoods of farmers, and how they can highlight to governments the enabling policy environments needed to accelerate this type of action. The World Economic Forum is here to support this public-private collaboration. It is what we do the best and how we have confidence that we can work together to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. In our last report, the Tropical Forest Alliance outlined how demand for agricultural commodities has risen an astonishing 50% in the last 20 years. And with 1.8 billion people projected to enter the middle class before 2030, this is only set to grow. That is a stark reminder of the reality we face and why this type of action from our leading agriculture commodity trading companies is so vital if we are to reach our climate goals while also delivering on food security. We have no time to lose. Let's not move around deck chairs on Titanic. Let's roll up our sleeves and deliver on this promise. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bjørge, for that ambitious announcement. It's really heartening to hear that the 10 major agricultural commodities traders responsible for half of all trade in agricultural commodities have made these pledges. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you.
And thank you to you and the WEF for helping back and make this happen. Let me use this opportunity to thank all our speakers wholeheartedly for their interventions. Your remarks have shown that governments and private actors are taking concrete steps to ensure that trade makes a positive contribution to sustainable outcomes on forests and land use. We all now need to redouble our efforts to ensure that trade makes real changes in people's lives, both now and for generations to come. Thank you very much. And now let me hand over to our wonderful MC.
Thank you so much, Ngozi. Thank you both for staying with us. Thank you to the President of the European Commission and the President of Ghana. It has been such a pleasure having this as our closing session, because we do know that, as you have so clearly indicated, Ngozi, that we have to think about trade as one of the systemic shifts that address the way in which we protect our forests. So thank you both.
Thank you.
And may I lead you off to the left. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, and if there are any excellencies still in the room, all of you who are still watching, I feel as if I've run a marathon myself this morning. There have been so many incredible announcements. Such an important way to start our COP26 commitments. We've been asked time and time again by the next generation, by the youth that are not in this room, that we must turn our words into action. That is what we were told as well time and time again today, not only by Indigenous peoples and community leaders, but by the leaders of so many countries. This has been an extraordinary event, with a huge thanks to our host country, to the distinguished guests, and to the unprecedented alliance of governments, companies, financial actors, and non-state leaders, all of whom have come forward with commitments. This is about mutual respect and solidarity. We have shifted the bar. How have we done that this morning? Please take note. 100 countries have committed to halt and reverse forest loss and land degradation by 2030. This is the decisive decade. Through the Glasgow Leaders' Declaration on Forests and Land Use, this is such a powerful demonstration of political will and collaboration from countries accounting for over 80% of the world's forests. Again, this has never been done before. But follow through, as we've all been saying today, is absolutely critical. This cannot be mere words. It cannot be a moment in time. We have seen substantial commitments to action today, and we must translate those 12 billion public climate finance to forests and the 7.2 billion private finance that now has been mobilized into capital that truly flows to protect the Congo Basin, to protect the Amazon, to protect our lungs across the globe. We have also seen commitments to begin the systemic shifts required to truly put the world on a path to deliver this 2030 goal. Multilateral development banks have committed to entrench nature in their policy and their operations. Promising public-private partnership has been announced through the LEAF Coalition. CEOs from more than 30 financial institutions with portfolios worth over 8.7 trillion of global assets say they will eliminate investment in activities linked to deforestation. And we've seen a unique offering from major traders to support supply chain action consistent with a 1.5 degrees Celsius pathway. This sets out a clear roadmap to COP27, and it enables us to move forward. The launch of the FACT roadmap to deliver sustainable trade and reduce pressure on forests, which we've just heard about, including support for smallholder farmers and improving the transparency of supply chains, endorsed by 28 governments representing 76% of global trade in key commodities that can threaten forests. Yes, delivery is everything. We need urgent results and further commitments and action to underpin these fine words. Our next steps will be truly defining. That is how I leave you today. As was so promptly indicated, may we all get in the same canoe, using synergetic paddles to get us there. As we move on this pathway, this stream, which will become, we hope, many streams, to really shift deforestation, to stop deforestation, and to focus also our minds on regeneration. Thank you again to all of the incredible, esteemed leaders from the private and the public sector that have made truly a difference today. And thank you for staying here with me today as well. Stay safe.
do? Get some selfie. Give me 2 minutes. Let me get the table set and I'll get some for you if you have it. Skills now.
I know, I was getting quite good at it as well.
English, you can kind of. Yeah, yes, exactly. Yeah. So I was thinking behind there, and then it gives me this out of the way. Well, and it means that you've got coverage that way, and you've got something this way now. Because I'm here, so. Can we get a sandwich back, do we? They wear boots. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You don't want to do that. I guess we get some of those. You don't necessarily have to put your foot in the hole.
Ladies and gentlemen, this session is now closed. I ask you please to
I'll show you what I mean.
make your way to the exit. Thank you.
You see what I mean? Just keep pulling it. Just keep pulling it. Both your hands in front. That's it. There you go. Yeah. Sorry, I know it's very basic, but it's like it helps. Yeah, that's it now. There you go. That's it. That's it. Thank you. Nice one. Well done. Yeah, it helps. I said that. Oh, yeah, just this last bit. Thanks. Perfect. Oh, did he join it? Yeah. Normally you should let Vision know when we pull the cable, we unplug the cable, let Vision know. Sometimes it goes off and then they see it go off and they're like, shit, there's something wrong with the camera. I didn't know. I should be. I don't know if you've been told to be here today. Yeah, cool. Thank you. Oh, did you chuck my jump?
Yeah, I just put everything in there.
do that one, sorry. Perfect.
You can come and grab something, Pete.
Yeah. The only thing is they're going to send someone down. I'll send someone down to meet you.
They won't be able to get in.